Hello and welcome to This Inspired Life. My name is Andy Taylor, and in this video we're talking about the Matrix and advertising, search engines and algorithms. Now I know that probably doesn't make any sense at all to you given the nature of this channel and the fact that we are gearing every piece of content to helping you discover and create a life that makes you go wow, and a life by design. But if you stick with me to the end of the video, you will understand entirely what both of those things and all of those things have to do with the content for today. Now, excuse me. Before I get started, I would really appreciate it. It's a young channel, it's a new project, so I would really appreciate some support and hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I will notify you. You'll get notified when there's new content available. So thank you very much for your support in advance. Now, what are we talking about? And what am I on about when I say that we're going to be talking about the Matrix, for starters? Now, the Matrix, if you've been living under a rock and you've never seen the movie, is a science fiction film. And it basically portrays the fact that there are these two alternate realities. So our hero, Neo, is a normal everyday computer programmer, a normal everyday guy, does his thing, lives at home, blah, blah, blah. But he's a hacker as well. So he's kind of in the system. But what he doesn't understand at the beginning of the movie, which becomes clear, is the fact that it's all an illusion. It's what he thinks of as reality is made up. And in fact, the real reality, the actual reality, is something altogether more sinister. So how does that relate to personal development topics? How does that relate to the content that I want to bring you and help you create a life by design? Well, it does in a big way, it turns out, because what I want to talk about today is how each one of us has these interpretations of what's going on in the world around us, and that in itself creates what we see as reality. Okay, so if I was to tell you that what you believe to be reality and the world is not true, it's just what you see as being reality. So it's it's your version of reality in a way. And where that becomes really kind of interesting is the fact that if we were to live life thinking that what is on the outside, what we're told is reality, it would suck big time. And we'd all be kind of screwed, really, because with everything that's going on in the world, how can you not be depressed? How could you not get stressed and anxious at the very idea of something? So what actually happens, and where did it come from? How did we create them? And what can we do about it? And how can we improve them? Well, first off, it's useful to know what we're talking about. So what I refer to, the way that I refer to these is as mental constructs. That is to say that we create them in our minds. We create the idea that this is real, that reality is this in our heads. So how do we do that? Excuse me. Well, for the majority of people, and this is kind of where we get to the idea that people go through life on autopilot because they don't ever actively take a role. They don't actively step into their own role in their own life story. So where this comes from then is the fact that when we're born, we grow and we develop and we're exposed to more information, we're exposed to more knowledge, we're exposed to more experiences of life and the world around us, and we're told certain things by our parents, by our friends, by their parents, by teachers, by fellow students and school friends, and when we get older, lecturers and philosophers and professors and bosses and business owners and respected members of society all tell us these things, and we're all exposed to the news media and social media and everything else that's out there today. And it all subconsciously, we're not aware of it often, that it creates this interpretation of reality. So what we're actually living, we're not actually living a reality, we're not living in a reality, what we're living in is our interpretation of reality. So reality is something that we experience. So however we experience certain situations, that is our reality. So that's what's real for us. This explains why you can get such disparity when you have two people, potentially, let's say two people traveling along on a journey in the same vehicle, and they're stopped in traffic and there's a terrible accident and they can see the aftermath. One person of the two might see that and think, oh, for God's sake, now we're going to be late, we're going to miss our dinner date, we're going to not be able to check into the hotel until later, we're going to have to wait now, and it's such an inconvenience. Whereas the other person may see the same thing and think, oh, that looks terrible, I hope everyone's okay. Right? So the interpretation of reality is different. The event is the same, what they witnessed is the same, but the interpretation of it is different. Okay, this is what I'm talking about, and these are the mental constructs that we create, or more appropriately in this case, at the beginning at least, these are the mental constructs that our mind has created, often without our full awareness. So what happens is that we have all this information come in and we need to make sense of it. So the brain automatically, the subconscious brain, the subconscious mind automatically goes on a little journey to find every piece of information, every piece of literature, every news story, every article, every video it can find to back that up. So we get this idea and we get this thought in our head that this is what reality is. And then our brain goes full out to find evidence to back it up, and evidence to reinforce it and to establish it and to basically validate it and say, yeah, this is true. Okay, so why is that such a big issue? Well, it's such a big issue because the majority of the input that we've got, if we don't think about it, is negative. Okay, you're very, very fortunate if you're making no conscious effort and you have a positive view of the world right now, and you have a positive outlook, and you see that your reality is perfect and it's awesome and everything else. You're very fortunate in that, if that's the case for you. But for most people, sadly, it's not. For most people, they see all of this and they feel helpless, they feel disenchanted, they feel stressed, they can feel anxious. And if you are feeling particularly stressed and particularly anxious with your perception, how you see reality, then it is time to step up and it is time to do something about it. And that's what this video is going to help you to do. Because what we're going to look at how you can, number one, identify what current understanding, what current interpretation you have of reality. Number two, we're going to deconstruct that. And what it's worth bearing in mind at this point, and what I want you to take away and understand at this point really, in order to move forward practically, is understand that it's no good removing something negative, whether it's a habit or a mental construct. You can't just deconstruct a negative mental construct. Okay? Nature abhors a vacuum, and we are creatures of nature. So what we need to bear in mind is the fact that you can't just remove something, because if you leave it, the weeds will grow and it will just be replaced by the same thing, if not worse, over time. So what we need to do is we need to operate like a two-pronged approach, where we're deconstructing the negative interpretation of reality that we hold currently, and we are replacing it with a much more positive, life-enhancing and empowering one. Okay, so the good news is that it's relatively simple to do, although the first couple of stages are quite complicated. I know that sounds contradictory, but bear with me. They sound complicated, I should say. Because what we need to do is we need to kind of identify what negative interpretation we're holding and what are we holding on to. And then we need to kind of pull ourselves out of that and start pulling it apart. And the way you do that is you ask questions. Now, primarily questions are used by the goal-setting elite advisors to use questions such as, what can I do? Where do I want my life to be? And we're going to get to that, but not just yet. Because what we need to do first is to ask the flip side of those questions, almost, with regards to our negative interpretation, our current limiting negative interpretation of what we see as reality. And the way you do that is you ask questions, and a good one to start with would be, let's say you have a negative interpretation of reality that says all men are arseholes. Okay? Now, you ask yourself the question, how is this not true for me? Right? Because you will, I'm certain, be able to, with your experiences, with your vast amount of friends and family, etc., be able to come up with at least one man who is not an arsehole. So he is proof that that is false. Okay, that one person, that one example that you've been able to come up with is enough proof that the postulation of the negative interpretation of what is reality is false for you. Because you know one man that's decent. So if you know one man, chances are there are more. Okay? So you may be in a situation where you have this ability based on bad dating experiences or whatever it might be, or bad marriages, that all men are assholes. When in fact you can yourself, by asking the question, how is this not true for me? You can come up with 1, 2, 3, 4 examples of how this is not true. And 3 or 4 examples of men that you know, even if it's in passing, who aren't arseholes. Brother, dad, uncle, whatever it might be. You can identify a number of examples that reinforce that that is not true. Okay, so that's simplistically putting it, but it's the same, and it's the same regardless of the scenario that we're talking about. So let's say you have your negative interpretation of reality with regards to money is that only arseholes can make money, or you have to be a real dick and tread all over people on the way up the ladder to earn the big bucks. That kind of thing, which is kind of prevalent, unfortunately, in a lot of places with a lot of people. So again, you ask yourself that magic question, that perfect base question, and it is just a base question. You can go on from that. But the base question, how is this not true for me? Well, okay, you can name entrepreneurs that you know that are very philanthropic and who treat their employees well, who have made good money and have got a really successful business. And you can come up with all kinds of evidence, in a way, in that sense, of people who have made money, who have become successful without treading all over everyone else to get to where they are. So you see how it works. When you start to deconstruct it, it's a fairly simple question to start with. That is, how is this not true for me? So what I would say is that if you're suffering with stress or anxiety, given especially what's going on in the world, and I'm recording this in June 2020, so there's rather a lot going on in the world right now. If you're getting particularly stressed at the situation, or nervous or anxious, then stop and ask yourself that question. So how is this not true for me? So if you're thinking the world is a terrible, dreadful, horrible place and it's all evil, it's all bad, and you're getting anxious and worked up about it and stressed, ask yourself, how is this not true for me? And you might pinpoint things like my family or my friends. No matter what happens, I know they've got my back. Or no matter what happens, I know my mum's going to be there for me. Or anything that you can pull on, anything that you can use as evidence to prove that's not the case. Because the second you do that, you put a chink in it. You put a crack in it. And once there's a crack, you can start to pull it apart. So that's essentially what we're doing. Now, to just understand a little bit more about how these are formed, how these mental constructs are formed, you imagine locking yourself away in your house for 2 months, and you shut all the curtains, you close all the blinds, all the drapes, you don't leave the house, you have food delivered or there's food already there, whatever it might be, and you only are allowed to have one news source. So you're only allowed to watch one news program a day. So that is all the information. That's the only way you get information, is through one source a day. Can you imagine what mental construct you would create as to what the interpretation of reality would be based on that? And it's kind of an off-the-wall example of the extreme of how they're constructed without our conscious awareness. But when you think about it, so many people do that every single day, with the exception of the fact that they don't focus on just one news source. They've got all the news sources on. They've got Facebook on, they've got Google News and BBC News and everything else. So they're getting all this information and they're creating this really, for want of a better word, really shitty interpretation of what is real, what is reality. And it's untrue. It's completely false. But because it's the interpretation of reality based on the information they have, they think it's true. They think it's real, right? So where does the Google search engine and the advertising algorithm come into it? Because as I said in the outset, if you remember, that we're going to be talking something about that. How this comes into play is the fact that the brain actually works in a very similar way, or should I say, the algorithm for online ads actually works in a very simple way, which parallels the way the human brain works. Now, that's going to sound exceptionally weird to some people, but allow me to explain it. Have you ever noticed that you can Google something, or you can look for a particular product on Amazon, and yet the next time you're on Facebook, the ads will pop up for that product, or for something similar? Or if you're on YouTube, relatable videos will come up in that area, or in that field, right? Have you ever noticed that? The same is true of the brain. Once you give it a focus, so once you do the search and you give it a focus, you tell it what you want to achieve. So in this case, what we're going to do, we are going to create a really good focal point for your brain, for your subconscious mind, to then disappear, go off and find any evidence that it can, any proof that it can, and any supportive material it can, to reinforce that and to help you to make that your reality. So what we're going to do is, as well as deconstruct the negative interpretation of reality that we've built up over the years, what we're going to do simultaneously, and this is an important thing to note as well, is the fact that if it's more powerful to deconstruct on the one hand, at the same time replacing. So it's like a check weigh. It's like a scale where if you remove from that side will rise. Okay, so you can remove from that side. So if you imagine how much quicker and how much faster this will happen, if you, as well as removing from this side, you're adding to this side, you're going to end up with a really big schism in between. So what I want you to do is just think about your current reality in any area, in any given situation. What is your current reality? And then ask yourself that really obvious, quite simple base question. How is this not true for me? And I want you to think of 2 or 3 examples of how that is not actually true for you when you think about it. So with some time, you'll be able to come up with a whole list, I would imagine, but just 2 or 3 will do for now. So when you've got 2 or 3 ideas or just points, essentially, that you can use to say, well, actually, that's not true for me. That's the chink in the armor that we need. That's when we can start pulling apart and deconstructing that idea. At the same time, you want to be asking on the constructive side. So if this is not true for me, what do I want to be true for me? What do I want to be true of my reality? Okay, so what do I want to be true of my interpretation of reality? And when you do that, you start to have this whole conversation going on, which is beautifully two-way. And as well as taking away from the negative and deconstructing the negative and the self-critical and the altogether depressing, frankly, in a lot of cases, interpretation of reality that we've created over the years, you can start to construct a much more positive one, a much more lightly framed and more positive and progressive one, which leads you to live that reality, that life that makes you go, wow. Because the aim of all of this is to create a sense of reality for you that every day when you wake up, part of you is singing at the prospect of living your life. So you can't wait to wake up in the morning, and you wake up bright-eyed, bushy-tailed and full of life, knowing that you get to live your life today. You get to live your fucking amazing life today. You get to be awesome today. And throughout the day, you are in flow. You are doing things, and they're running seamlessly and practically perfectly in every way. And it's a really important thing to note that nothing feels forced. Okay, nothing feels forced. Work, if you're doing work that makes you come alive, it doesn't ever feel like work. I mean, it's 7 o'clock at night here, and I'm still recording videos. So I'm happy. I'm in my element doing this. So I'm completely happy to do this. And I love doing this for you guys. So that kind of feeling you can live every day if you do this, because by deconstructing the negative interpretation and ideal of what you currently believe reality to be, you're removing that from your life. But by replacing it with what you want your reality to be like, what you want your life to be like. How do I want my life to be? By asking those questions and coming up with those answers and creating that wonderful interpretation of what your perfect life would be, then that is a home run. That is hitting it straight out of the park every time when you do that. And the more you do that, more detail will be able to apply. And here's the thing, even when you just start with that one question, it instantly refocuses the brain so that your brain is then off on a little quest. Your subconscious goes off on a quest. It says, right, you don't need me, I'm checking out, I'm going to help you out. And it will go on a quest, and it will find resources, it will find materials, it will find people that can help you make that interpretation of reality real for you. Okay, so that's important to notice. And there are a couple of other concepts I want to talk about in addition to this. So it's all based around it. The fundamental is the fact that we have these mental constructs and how we can replace negative ones with positive ones. It all comes from a place of what you might think of as selfishness, but it's really not. It's like the airline safety briefing where you're told to put your own oxygen mask on first and then help other people. Same principle applies here, is when it comes to care, if you don't focus on self-care first, you are very rarely in a situation to be of any good to anybody else. So focus on self-care and focus on this first, because when you can get yourself into a situation where your reality, what you believe to be reality, is fucking amazing, then you're in a much better place to help other people, right? And you're in a much better place to be a light in someone else's world, if that's how you want to see it. Because when you live a life that makes you go wow every day, and a life by design, you radiate wonder, joy, happiness, spirituality, and love everywhere you go. And by doing that, you encourage and you give permission to people. Very few people catch on to this, but you are giving permission to people. When you are blissfully happy, when you're living the life that makes you go wow, and you're living your beautiful reality or interpretation of reality that you can create, that you are creating as you go every day, you're creating this wonderful reality for you. As you do that, you are actively giving permission to people who watch you and think, oh my God, I wish I could be that happy. Oh, I wish I could love my work that much. Just by being you and being inspiring and motivating and happy in what you do and loving what you do, you give people permission to do the same. So what I want to talk about is something that I heard of, and I forget by whom, but it was through Mindvalley, which is a great network of coaches and leaders, and really worth checking out on YouTube, Mindvalley. But it's the concept of the me-centered universe, right? And it's this idea that at some level everything comes down to a simple question: how does that affect me? And you think about it just for a moment or two. Anything that's happened to anyone else in your life, so anything good or bad or indifferent that happens to your spouse or a loved one, brother, sister, whatever it is, anything that's happened, let's say your spouse gets a promotion, really big promotion, eventually will come a time where at some level you will ask the question in your head, so how does that affect me? Or again, use a scenario: you're in a mad rush on the way to an interview, and all of a sudden you come across the mother of all traffic jams. There's been a terrible accident, you hear on the radio, 4 cars involved, the road is blocked. Eventually, very quickly in that case, I would imagine, it will come down to, well, how's that going to affect me? Am I going to be late for the interview? Am I going to miss the opportunity with the job? Am I going to lose the house because I can't pay the mortgage? You go off on it. You follow it on, right? But it essentially, at some point, at some level, you will always take everything back, everything that happens around you, to how is that going to affect me? So that's the me-centered universe, right? And another concept I want to bring to you is from Sarit Kumar Rao, I believe his name was, and it's the concept of mental chatter. Now, I refer to that in my work as your inner monologue, your inner dialogue, okay? And it's everything that's going on at the moment even. I mean, if you're watching this on YouTube, at some point, when I have been going for a few moments and you've got the gist of what I'm talking about, we instantly and automatically kind of pick up on the vibe that, yeah, I know what's coming next. That's not the case. It doesn't happen like that. But the brain thinks that's okay to do that. So you may well be watching this, and after 5-10 minutes, your brain going, oh, what's for dinner? What do I can do for dinner? I wonder if little Johnny's got a baseball game tomorrow. No. I wonder when the kids are back at school. Things like that. That's inner monologue. That's the inner dialogue that you have all the time. And we all have it. I have it all the time. And it's a case of, once you understand it, you can embrace it. But it's not understanding it's there leaves you in a vulnerable position, because the inner monologue can just go off on a rant for no reason at all. And it can really screw your day up. Because as with the car accident example on the way to the interview, you can go off on a really derailed train of thought about, oh fuck, I'm going to miss the interview, I'm going to not get the job, I won't be able to pay the bills, I'm going to lose the house, I'm going to get kicked out on the street, there's going to be no food, my husband's going to leave me, my wife's going to leave me, take the kids, oh no, right? So you go off on a pretty fucked up train of thought. But so inner monologue, or the mental chatter, as Rao refers to it, is, again, it's crucial to understand where it comes from and what it is. But do you really have to do anything about it? Not really, because think of it as crazy Uncle Bob moved into the attic, right? And no matter what happens in the world, crazy Uncle Bob's always got something to say about it. Oftentimes it's bollocks, but he's always got something to say. So you've got crazy Uncle Bob going off on one, and whether or not you actually sit and listen and engage him is your choice, right? Crazy Uncle Bob's going to be going anyway, so it's your choice. But because he's crazy Uncle Bob, you can't kick him out. So what you do is you create a process whereby you can turn up the radio. So essentially you drown crazy Uncle Bob out, so that eventually you'll get to a point where it's a case of you'll hear him in the background, and then, oh, that's just Bob, it's okay, right? So how we do that is the fact that we create a secondary dialogue. We create a new inner monologue. And the way that we do that is that it's all to do with creating the, you know, the mental constructions, the mental, I've forgotten the word now, yeah, so basically the mental construct, that's the one, the mental constructs that we create, the positive ones, help us now to be able to have an inner monologue which supports us, which constantly helps us to evolve and learn and to grow and to develop and to continually work on our outcomes, what we want to achieve, the desired outcomes, the objectives, the projects that we want to work on. And as you know from previous videos, if you've watched them, if not, head back and watch them, because they're really quite interesting in the way that I explain what I believe are three of the fundamental principles, which are, you know, it's awareness, perspective, and perception. And, you know, your new inner monologue creates a new way of seeing the world, as does the new mental construct that we've been creating. So go away and play with this. This is what I invite you to do right now, is to finish the video, give us a like, subscribe to the channel. It really helps a lot and it means a lot. And go away and play with this. So think about how you see reality, how you interpret the world and what reality is to you right now. Okay, how you see it. Especially important if you are suffering with anxiety or stress, is to really hone in on what is really affecting you in this. Because it's never what's going on out there. It's always what's going on in here. Okay, so there's a really great quote by Michael Neill, is the fact that we're never afraid of what we think we're afraid of. We're afraid of what we think. And that's so true in every instance. Okay, because it's so important, especially if you're suffering with stress and anxiety, to just nail down and dig down and uncover what it is at the root of what's causing your anxiety and your stress. Because it's very rarely what's going on the streets, it's what it might mean for you. Okay, so even more important for you guys, if you're suffering with anxiety and stress, is to really deconstruct that bad boy. Really deconstruct it. Get to the bottom of it. Strip it down to its component parts, and then construct a new one that's more positive, that's life enhancing, and that helps you create the life that makes you go wow, and makes you wake up every morning inspired, motivated, joyful at the prospect of living your life. So I'm going to leave it there. I hope this video has been useful for you. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've certainly enjoyed recording it, although I have had some tech difficulties today, hence why I'm recording so late. But I'm here. It's done. It's recorded. I'm so happy to get this to you, because it really is something that I really, really want to hammer home, is the fact that what we believe to be reality is actually a construct. It's something that we construct in our heads based on what's going on and what input we're receiving. But the most important thing that I want you to take away from today's video, from this video, is the idea that it's a construct. You can deconstruct it. And more importantly, bearing in mind that wonderful natural phenomenon that life abhors a vacuum, you can construct an even better one. You can construct one that's so positive, powerful, and life-enhancing that you cannot help but live a life that makes you go, wow. That's it for today. I'll see you again very soon. As I say, drop us a like, subscribe to the channel, and take care for now.